Hi, I'm Carrie, and welcome to episode 15 of the Sego Fibers podcast.
Gravel road, I've been asked to slow down. Fireplace, do you know how? Piles of paper, my desk is out. Who will care for the world now? Rest with me, close to curtains, brew some herbal tea.
Hi, welcome and welcome back. This is a podcast where I talk about knitting and projects and all sorts of fun things. And I want to give a special welcome to those of you who saw my last video, which was 23 knits for a hand knit wardrobe. I have plenty more ideas for videos like that. It was so much fun to put together. I really enjoyed it, and yeah, I'm having lots of fun thinking about what could come next. Since we have a few new faces here on the channel, I thought I would give a little bit more of an introduction about myself so you can get to know me a bit more. My name is Carrie, and I live in Salt Lake City, Utah with my husband Nathan and our 3 kids. Ethan is 4, Veronica is 2, and Lydia is 1. So the first finished object I'd like to share with you are the built-ins. So we just finished painting and putting the hardware on, and I just this weekend put all the things on the shelves. So they're not all our books, but it's probably about half of them. We're kind of book lovers here. And so it was really fun to arrange them in such a way that they kind of give a little snapshot summary of who we are. So I thought it might be fun to give you a tour at the end of this video of our bookshelves, and so you can get to know me that way. So if you're interested, you can stay for that. But other than that, we'll just dive right into knitting. Let's get started with our first knitted finished object, and that's the Cumulus Tee by PetiteKnit. And so I really struggled with gauge on this one. I'm not quite sure what happened. It may or may not have something to do with the fact that I only made 2 teeny tiny gauge swatches. Yeah, but it was really strange. So the first swatch I made, I did with the recommended needle size, which was 3mm. And the other swatch I made, I think, was with 3.5mm. That sounds right. And the weird thing was that they seemed to have the same stitch count, the same gauge. But one was like stretchier than the other, and I did notice the row gauge was different, but I didn't pay attention to that when I should have. But anyway, the yarn I used was Sandnes Garn Tynn, and it is so pretty. I really like how this yarn came out. I believe it's colorway 6531. It's like a nice light blue, but it's very thin. My husband Nathan got this as a Christmas present for me, which was super sweet. And because I was curious to try it because I'd never seen it in person yet, and I wanted to give it a try. And so he got to pick the color, and he got the perfect amount of yarn for this. And yeah, so I am, I'd say, 90% pleased with the finished object because of my gauge issues, but as far as the yarn goes, 10 out of 10, I would use this again. I like it. It feels nice and light. It has really nice drape. So I set out to knit the size extra small, and I ended up with something roughly around there, maybe slightly a wider circumference. The gauge you're supposed to have is 28 stitches and 40 rows per 4 inches, and my gauge was 31 stitches and 43 rows per 4 inches, and it showed. But so I set out to knit the extra small, and when I just split for sleeves and tried it on for a fit check, it was just like it was super uncomfortable. So I was telling this to Nathan, and he said, well, why don't you just rip back and then add more increases to make it bigger? And I'm like, well, yes, that is the right solution for this. So I followed his advice, and I added increases to make it to the size medium. I started using the medium size stitch count. And so I did that for the rest of the tee. And yeah, I'd say overall it worked out. The other modification I did was I didn't do any decreases for any of the I cords. So like on some of these, you're supposed to decrease as you do the I cord. I didn't do that because then I knew like it would be too tight. And I also used the same needle size for the I cord as the main body of the tee. So I only used one needle throughout. It's definitely long enough. I actually really do like how it fits, and I love how it looks like tucked in. I think that looks really nice. The little thing that's still bugging me a bit about this tee is there's bunching right here, and so even though I made a bigger size, it's still a little high in the armhole separation. So like I don't really love how there's all these kind of creases going on here and the bunching happening. And I think it's because there's not enough like room for this to go. There's not enough room in there. So my thought that I'm considering is I might thread a couple of sock needles through the yoke area, like right before the separation for sleeves. So it'd go like all the way around. So, and then I might snip it like an afterthought heel in a sock, and then unravel it, pop the yoke away from the body of the tee, and then attach yarn to the yoke, knit down an inch or so, and then Kitchener stitch the body back to the rest of it. And so I'd put it back together. And so then I would have more room here, and then maybe it won't crease. So the tricky bit for that, I think, will be making sure my tension is the same, especially for the Kitchener stitch, because I don't want like I don't want to have a weird stripe going right there, if you know what I mean. But I'm in no rush to do that. I might just wear it for a while and see if it really bugs me. If it really bugs me and I end up not wearing it, then I'll try it, but we'll see. So that's my only thing, but I have plenty of yarn left. Nathan gave me 5 balls of this, and because of my weird gauge issues, I needed 5. This is my last one. I still have most of it left though, so there's plenty if I do want to lengthen the yoke. But I think if I had gotten gauge and I made the size extra small, I only would have needed 4. But I really enjoyed the pattern. I loved knitting it, and I do have plans for another one. And this time I want to use this Knitting for Olive cotton merino. And I just think this color of a v-neck tee would be gorgeous. I think I would get so much use out of this. It would look great with jeans and with shorts and everything, and I think it would be really fun. And this is also my first time using Knitting for Olive, and I'm looking forward to it. This is the colorway Mole, and I have 4 of these, and it runs, let's see, 250 meters. So there's plenty of yardage there, and it recommends a 28 stitch gauge, which is the same as the pattern. So that should be a good match for it. If I can get gauge this time, which I will be very particular about doing. And as for works in progress, our first one for today is sweater number 15 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. And I am using Patagonia organic merino yarn for this one. And I have to say, I love this yarn. I am very, very happy with this. I first came across it as I was browsing Wool & Company. They have some really great colors. So I already knew that I wanted to try it at some point. And then last time I went to Denver to visit some family, we went to the LambShoppe yarn store. And they had this exact yarn on sale. So I was like, ooh, now is the time. I think it was like 40% off on it or something, which was crazy. So I got 4 skeins of this, and when I was looking at what to do with it, sweater number 15 came up, and that was just the thing. It was perfect. I love the color, yarn, and pattern combo. I think it's just great. So the pattern calls for a size 4.5mm needle. And so my first swatch was with this one, and it gives you the stitch gauge and pattern. So I did my swatch and cables, which was really simple to do actually. And I really like the yarn. Like I like how the fabric comes out with this one, but the stitch gauge was too tight, too many stitches per the 4 inches. So I went up a needle size to 5mm, and I got this one. And these have been washed and blocked. And at first I was like, oh, is this too loose and holy? And I really don't think it looks that way on camera. And now that it's been washed and blocked and had time to like puff up and air out and stuff, it's not too loose at all. But I've noticed over the years, like I really gravitate towards tighter gauge fabrics. And when I get a yarn, it's like, I don't want there to be any gaps between the stitches. Like I don't want to see through it at all. And so I'm trying to like ease myself out of that, because I'm finding as I'm knitting sweaters that a lot of the designers have a looser gauge for a looser fabric than I would default to. And so it's like, okay, so I need to learn. Like there's nothing wrong with a tight gauge if that's what you're going for, but if I'm trying to copy something, then I should probably try it. And I'm actually liking it. While this tighter gauge makes a really nice fabric, this looser one is more drapey. Oh yeah, and you can see the size difference there. But it's definitely drapey and flowy. And I knew for this sweater in particular, I wanted it to have a lot of drape because it's extra oversized, probably the most oversized sweater I'll have made. And I just wanted the extra cozy, wearing a blanket kind of feeling. So let's get out the project. Here's the yarn caked up. It is so squishy and soft. And here we are. It looks kind of funny right now. So my favorite thing about the sweater is the sleeve detail on the back. And so you've got, so this is the back. And you start out here and you cast on stitches, and then you start doing this, and then this cable on this side and this cable on this side are knitted at the same time as everything else. So you end up with like a trapezoid shape. I've never done this before, and it's really easy. I could not believe it. When I was like reading the pattern and actually knitting it, I was just taking it one line at a time. But I thought, oh man, how am I going to figure this out? How is this thing going to be created? But it was so simple, and it blew my mind. I couldn't believe how simple it was. And it just got all my thoughts churning about like, man, if in the future, if I were to ever design a sweater or something, I would definitely figure something like this out to make a cool detail along a shoulder increase. Like, it's really fun. But yeah, I love the details in this sweater. It is so thoughtful. So yeah, this cable like melds into this one. It's perfect. And anyway, so then yeah, you make this back piece down to the underarms, and then You cast on stitches for this side. No, you don't cast on, you pick up stitches for this side, and then you knit down to here, and then do the same thing on the other side. Pick up stitches, knit down to here, and then you connect these two sides together, cast on a bit in the middle, and come down. It's delightful. This is my first time knitting this style of construction for a sweater, and I just want to make all the sweaters like this. Like, it is so much fun. There is enough going on to keep you interested, but there's enough breaks in there to like say, okay, mindless knitting for half an hour or more, and then like, oh yay, now I get to change and do something over here. So it's just, I can't speak more highly of this. Love the yarn, love the pattern, very happy about this sweater. The only reason I'm not working on it more and don't have more done is because of my next whip. All right, so this next whip has a bit of a story. Over the last several months, I've had like 4 or 5 different knitting endeavors not work out. So I was feeling a little disappointed about that. And that's more like applying for a test knit and not getting it, or submitting a design and it not working out, or one thing or another, and various like knitting projects themselves not going to plan. So when I went to the Great Basin Fiber Arts Fair, I was looking around at all the different booths, and my jaw just dropped when I saw the booth of this hand dyer, and she is Yarn Nouveau. Her name's Alicia. She's crazy nice. But she just had this wall of beautiful colors. I'll see if I can put a picture in here. But I think color palette wise, if you like the palette of Knitting for Olive, you will like Yarn Nouveau. It's obviously not the same. Like Knitting for Olive has solids and Yarn Nouveau has like the hand dyed tonal things and a few slightly variegated, but mostly semi-tonals. But the vibe is very similar. And so I highly recommend checking her out. She's fantastic. My favorite yarns of hers are her yak bases because the depth of color in them is just stunning. My favorite color of hers is called Bruff on the yak DK. Like, that's my dream yarn from her. But anyway, so I got to talking with her. She was just so nice and easy to talk to. She asked me what I like to knit and, nice chit chat stuff. She mentioned that she likes to knit sweaters, but she doesn't have that much time for it anymore with all the dyeing. So she said she'd probably need to look for a sample knitter at some point. So I was like, oh, okay, well, that's good to know. And so I went home and thought about it. And so I reached out and was like, hey, if at some point you want to use a sample knitter, I'd be happy to make you a sweater. And she said yes. So I was really excited for that connection there because I majorly love her yarn, but it's beyond my price point to get a whole sweater's worth of hand-dyed yarn. Like, it's gorgeous and worth it if you have the budget for it, but I'm not really there right now. So this way I can enjoy using her yarn and try out her bases and give it back so she can use it in her shop. And she will pay me in yarn. So basically our deal is like, if she gives me X amount of skeins to make a sweater, I can pick that many amount of skeins for myself afterwards. So that's really exciting. So I am making for her the Snowy Forest by Midori Hirose. It is a round yoke sweater with some really big, beautiful cables here, very oversized with a deep yoke. So like, I don't think the sleeve separation is till like way down there. So it should have a very oversized, interesting, flowy fit. I probably wouldn't have made it for myself because of the deep yoke, but it's a really beautiful pattern, so I'm happy that I get the experience of knitting it, but I don't actually have to wear it. So I think personally it might feel weird to have such a deep yoke, but who knows? But I'm happy for the chance to knit it, and it's been a real pleasure so far. So the yarn she gave me to use is her Merino Sport Base, which is 100% merino wool, and this is the color Ironwood. It's coming out a little bit more warm and brown on camera. In real life, it's a little bit cooler. It's kind of like a gray brown, And I'm holding it together with a new base for her, which is her Suri Alpaca lace. And this one is a little bit browner in person. Here, I'll show them together. It's also in the color Ironwood. Yeah, so in real life, they're both a little bit cooler, and this one's even cooler still. But they look so good together. Well, that's kind of a truer representation. Yeah, that's the color. What's interesting about this one is that the typical Suri alpaca lace base has a shorter yardage than like a mohair silk. And so you can substitute them out, but the Suris tend to be a little bit thicker and it may affect your gauge. But this one has like the same gauge. So it is, let's see, if I can read backwards, 437 yards per 50 grams. So it's a little bit thinner, so it may be more equivalent as a substitute. She gave me 4 skeins of this and 4 skeins of this for 8 total. And that is plenty of yarn. There are so many sizes in this pattern. It's very size inclusive. I think it's like 2SX all the way to like 6XL, something like that. There's like 12 different sizes in this one or something. But there's also 2 mediums, so there's an M1 and an M2. So I'm doing the M1. I started this just after finishing the Cumulus with all of its gauge issues, and so I was thinking, like, not only is it a sample, so it should be right, like, I want to make sure, like, doubly make sure that it's right this time. So I made lots of swatches. My favorite needles to use are ChowGoo, the metal tips, and I'm slowly acquiring them over time because I already have an interchangeable set that Nathan got me for Christmas several years ago. I've been really happy with this set and I've been using it for years now. However, after using the ChowGoo needles every once in a while for things, my preferences are changing and my preferred are now metal needles. And I really, really love the cords on ChowGoos, and so I'm just slowly transitioning, like as I need needles, I'll get some of those. So the pattern actually recommends like a couple of different needles to use, whatever you need to get gauge, but their samples were made out of different kinds of yarn, so they ended up using different needles to do those. And so they have a couple different recommendations. The bigger one used a 7mm needle and a 6mm needle, but like the set doesn't come with a 7mm because it's not a US size, and I actually haven't found a set that includes 7mm or 3mm for that matter. Those are both non-US sizes, and so if you're aware of an interchangeable set that has those, I'd be curious. I'm not really looking for that. I'm just unaware of any set that includes those, which seems odd to me, but oh well. But the set does have 6.5mm, and the next size after that is 8mm. So the first swatch I made was with the 8mm. And it came out to this, which, I mean, is okay. It's holier than I would prefer. Like, going back to what I said earlier about not wanting lots of holes in my fabric and wanting denser things, my first reaction to this was like, whoa, that's way too loose. But now it's like, you could probably get away with it. I don't know. It's still pretty holy in my opinion. And so I went to the next size down, which was the 6.5mm, and it came out to this one, which in my opinion is much better. This is like a proper knitted fabric. I like it. However, the stitch gauge for this one was too big. The stitch gauge for this one was too small. To double check, I made another one with the 6.5mm, and I wanted like a really big swatch. And for some reason, like I just forgot to knit these in the round, so I didn't. So these were knitted flat. This one I remembered, so I knit it in the round, which is why it has these funky things. But yeah, so you can see like the size difference there. But I just really wanted to double check that this size might be okay. But it ended up being exactly the same as my little swatch. So now I know, at least in this case, that it didn't matter if I work back and forth around the round, and it didn't matter if I have more than double the amount of stitches needed for the swatch gauge. So the gauge I was looking for is 15 stitches per 4 inches, and the 6.5 millimeter needle got 16, and the 8 millimeter needle got 14. And so I needed something in the middle that I did not have, because these are pretty much all my needles except for like small sock needles, which are useless for this. So I talked to Alicia, and she was actually fine with me adjusting the stitch count and making a bigger size to end up with the equivalent of an M2. And I actually did start on that, and I got like probably this far into the yoke using the 6.5 millimeter needle and making a size large, which would end up with an M2. So I decided that I would look for some 7 millimeter needles, and thankfully Blazing Needles, which is one of my local yarn stores, had some in stock, and so I was able to pick those up, and now I have a new set of tips to add to my collection. But all of my cords are for the size small of their line, and the 7 millimeters use size large cords. So I just also picked up, I don't know if it'll focus. I also picked up an adapter that kind of makes it work with the small cords and the large size tips. So that was really handy. Now I can use these with all the cords I already have. So that's good. And yeah, so I made a swatch for this one too, and thankfully I got gauge. Finally got gauge with the 7 millimeters. I really want to give her a good finished object that she can proudly use in her shop. And she will be taking this sweater to Flock Fiber Festival up in Seattle, Washington. So go check that out. It looks like a really fun festival. It's their first ever festival. It's a brand new one. I think Jess from La Mercerie is putting it on and one of the organizers. And so, I mean, it should be really good. If I was closer, I would definitely go. But yeah, so if you're in the area, you can go see Yarn Nouveau in person. And I highly recommend doing so because her yarn is phenomenally gorgeous, and I am not exaggerating. To see the whole wall up of her yarn is truly mind-blowing. So go check her out. So I'll show you the sweater so far, and this is how the yarn looks kind of caked up. Alrighty. So it has a very kind of like more open neck. I think it'll stretch and block out a little bit more this way. I have to say, like, I am falling more and more in love with this color. I think it is super wearable, and it's a very flattering color to wear. But here, sorry, it's all bunched up on these needles, but let's see if we can have a better picture of the cables so far. So it has these like really nice big chunky cables here, and there's going to be like 4 rows of these big ones. 1, 2, yeah, I think I've just started the third, and then in between them is this nice little kind of fishbone looking cable. It's really simple. I have to say, it is a very cozy and comfortable pattern to knit. I'm really enjoying it. There's a little bit of interest for every cable row, but there aren't that many if you don't count the like 1x1 cables, which are super simple. But this is truly a delightful project. I am alternating skeins because just in case that there's any differences in the skeins, this will help mitigate any striping or weird color blocks. I've actually been really surprised at how no fuss this knit has been. I haven't really alternated skeins that much before, let alone like a set of 2 balls over here and a set of 2 balls over here, and half of them being like a fuzzy yarn. Like, this is my first time actually holding a fuzzy lace weight with another yarn for a project, and I've really looked forward to doing that, but I thought it would be a bit more fuss, especially alternating skeins. but there's no tangling and there's no issue if I ever need to rip back. Like, I've knit with a DK weight Suri alpaca before, and that one was more tricky to pull back because it would stick to itself so much and it was hard to undo. But as I said before, when I had made this much of the yoke in a smaller needle size, I ended up frogging that so I could start over. And that really wasn't hard at all, even alternating skeins and having the fuzzy yarn. I didn't have to freeze it, it didn't stick to itself too much, it was just really easy to do. And yeah, so I was really pleased about that. So my goal is to finish this by the middle of July, and that should be no problem. I'm almost like 3/4 of the way done on the yoke, and I only started this part like a week ago maybe, so there should be plenty of time. Yeah, I highly recommend the pattern. It's really fun to do. And I saw in the project pages that some people had modified the sweater to not have the deep yoke, so that's possible if you would prefer that. All right, I think that's all of the knitting so far. So let's get into the bookshelf tour. I'll show you what it looks like from a distance so you can see the whole thing, and then we will kind of zoom in and look at a few different things. All right, so here is a picture of what it looked like before we made the built-ins. We had a hutch here that we gave away, and now it looks like this. So let's start off with the most important section, which is, of course, all the knitting and fiber stuff. So down here we have this basket where I keep, well, yarn to make it look pretty, but underneath are some podcasting things like a microphone, and I put my little tripod in there too. And then I put the yarn on top to make it look better. And then there's a beautiful project bag that my mother-in-law made. Cute little llama alpaca thing. And a typographer's tray. And then we have this really nice basket. And I found that locally at a Christmas market here. It was really cool. I got to talk to people, and it was just a really neat experience. I would love to find some more like this. And then in here we have extra yarn for current projects, and also yarn that I would really love to make with soon, like this pure silk knitting for Olive, and this Sandnes Garn Lena. And there's also a cone in there, which I'm excited to use. My parents gave that to me for Christmas, and very excited. I already have a pattern in mind for that, so that'll be fun. And then up here, I love all animal things, and so I thought this duck-footed dish was hilarious. I thought this would be a cute place to put progress keepers and stitch markers for whenever I am in need of one. Then sweater number 15 is in here, and here are my fun fiber books. Various knitting ones. You've seen me knit mittens from here, socks from here. I'm very excited about neons and neutrals. My mom and dad got this for my birthday, and very excited to make some of those patterns. I've read this part way through, and I'm really enjoying it. I think this has lots of great motifs for colorwork knitting for like Christmas projects. I want to use that. I've made several of these guys. They're very cute. And then these are more like spinning and fiber related. And then a couple of dyeing books. This one is really good, and that's my dye journal. Then we'll go down here. So let's see. I went to college to study graphic design, and I did that for a little over 13 years until last May or so. So it's been about a year now that I have decided to focus on family stuff full time. But even before that, I was really curious to study type design. And so I'll show some of these books. I was very close to going to grad school to be a type designer, but ended up deciding not to. And it's funny, to this day I'm not quite sure if that was the right decision or not, but I like how my life has turned out, so I guess it was a good one. So yeah, just various different ones here. These are actually two that I'm rather proud of. If you're interested in type design, these are must reads. And where is the other one? This one is considered the typographic Bible. It's usually the first one you get if you're into type design or typography in general. This is good for any graphic designer because it's more about the use of text as opposed to the design of the letters themselves. These are just really fun for seeing like a history of typefaces and how things have changed over the years. This I got when I visited my cousin in London, and we went to this exhibition at the Barbican, and it was by far the best exhibition I've ever been to in my life. It was so much fun. Like, seriously. Like, I'm interested in the Bauhaus anyway, but this exhibition was fantastic. Anything else of note? We have a different section here with flowers. I love botanical illustration, and I think it's just beautiful. This one is actually a really good read, and it also has really nice pictures in it. This one is just really cool. It's a how-to of how to make flowers like this out of crepe paper. Definitely recommend it if you're interested in another craft. I have not tried it yet, but I really am intrigued by it. And then this one is about growing cut flowers. These are about painting watercolor flowers, and then this is about various gardening tips here in the West. Then coming up here we have, these are a bit misfit. This is a really fun one I got in art school. It is the same Yoko Ono from all the Beatles stuff, but she wrote this book, and I came across this when I was studying Fluxus in art history, and I ended up making my own version of a Fluxus book, which was this guy. So that was kind of a fun exercise. My husband Nathan went to architecture school, so we have a few of his books up here. And let's see, moving up, we've got some art history books. I really love this one. I haven't read it, I just like it for how it looks. Herb Lublin designed the typeface on the cover of this, and it is just typeset so nicely. I just think it's really beautiful. And I got this one when I got to go to the Louvre. It has a lot of the prints of Gerard Richter in there. I thought it was really cool. And when Nathan and I went to Paris, we got this together at, what's it called? I'll put the name of it up. But that was a fun memory keeper from that. And then we got this as a gift one Christmas. It has a bunch of pictures by Tolkien that he made himself. And like, it's really nicely put together, and it's really, really cool to look at. Tolkien is my favorite author, so that's a special one. And then coming across, we have a variety of poetry books. And this is a special favorite of mine. I really like George Herbert. He lived a long time ago. I think it was in like the 1500s or something. And Nathan got me this copy of his book, The Temple, which is a series of poems. And like, this is like archival museum quality bookbinding. Like, it's really cool, like from a bookbinding perspective. It's really well done. And what I love about this is that it's typeset the original way that it was written. So let's see if I can find one of the pages, but like it's like Old English or Middle English or however you call it. You have to kind of work out what these different things mean. They also have scans, yeah, like that. It's just so cool. They have all of his notations and various things. So I love him as a writer, and this is just really cool to have that kind of copy there. He's very in touch with human experience and does not overlook things. And then coming across here, we have the beginning of our cooking area. So I used to live in St. Augustine, Florida, and so these two pieces here are Spanish pottery from a restaurant downtown, and then these two bits of pottery are from Brazil, where my aunt and uncle spend half their time. And then down here are our other cookbooks. This one I use all the time. I love it. It's my favorite cookbook. If you can find it, I highly recommend it. I'm not sure if it's in print anymore, but it is really good. Pretty much any American dish that you can think of or use is in there, and they test everything to make sure that they work. And my sister-in-law made this one with a bunch of family recipes. I also use this Instant Pot one all the time. There's a really good risotto one in there. And then if you like Italian food, these are fantastic. Italian Too Easy, which is the second edition, and then Italian Easy, which is the first volume. And this kind of Italian is very light and fresh and simple. Yep. And then down here, we've got this. I think I'm going to put a picture frame there, and we'll see if this recipe box stays. After dinners, we sit around the table and we'll read something and probably answer a family question and sing a song and do like random stuff like that. And my hope for as the kids get older is we could even take a poem out of here and discuss that. So we'll probably have to find some sort of like kid accessible poetry book, but I'm sure we can find one. And I think that would be a really cool thing to talk about. All right, zooming out a little bit. We have things about Old England there. This skinny book, The Kings and Queens of England and Scotland, is fascinating. I just think it's really interesting to learn about a country that's been around so long. It's so old and it's changed so much. And then various other literature. And then more literature. And it flows into some philosophy. Most of our philosophy books are downstairs because Nathan's working on teaching an ethics class this fall. But this one is a really good one, Sophie's World, if you're interested in getting kind of an overview of different philosophies. It introduces you to a bunch of different philosophers in a novel story format. So it's really accessible that way. I read that in high school and I still remember it. And then coming over here, we have some of our favorites. So we're big C.S. Lewis fans, so we have a bunch of his here. These are probably his most famous, The Chronicles of Narnia, but my favorite of his is the Space Trilogy, and my favorite book of those three is That Hideous Strength. I just think it is so relatable in a ridiculous way. Like he describes it in one of the intros as like an old time fairy tale where at the very beginning of the story it's very normal and it seems like nonfiction and it's in our world, and then slowly but surely things get more weird and a little more weird and a little more weird until like things are just totally different. And then Hind's Feet on High Places has been a long-time favorite of mine, and every time I read it, I relate to a different part of the journey that the main character goes on. And A Severe Mercy has been a very kind of influential book on me and Nathan's relationship. So that's been an important one. And then we're big fans of William Cooper. He's another poet and songwriter that lived, I think, in the 1700s. And he had a very troubled life, and he dealt with depression a lot, which Nathan and I also dealt with. So learning about his trouble and his relationship with God and how he worked through all of these difficult things has been encouraging. Yeah. So then I'll give an overview again. That's what that looks like. And then as for the other cabinets, we've got random glassware and wine glasses. You can see my PJ pants. Hi. And then down in here, we've got lots of storage for like kitchen things. And then I'm pretty sure these two are filled up with board games. So, yeah, that's how the bookshelf came out. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the bookshelf tour and getting to know me a little bit more. Do you have any of these books? Or better yet, do you have any book recommendations? I'd love to hear them. Especially like science fiction and fantasy. I read, like, I didn't even show any of my fiction books because they're downstairs. But yeah, we're really into like my favorite author is Brandon Sanderson for like normal fantasy that's still being written. So if you have anything in that vein, I would love to hear it. Another thing about me is that I like to go bouldering in a rock climbing gym. And so I go with one of my friends like every 1 or 2 weeks, and we'll climb a few routes. And I'll show you a picture here of what a climbing gym looks like. And yeah, so that's been a lot of fun recently. And next week, actually, we're going to take a class together on how to do V3s. I've done a few of them, but I'm not very good at them yet. So I'm really looking forward to getting those skills and getting better there. What do you like to do for exercise or fun or reading? I'd love to hear. All right, thank you for joining me for this, for all of the knitting and all of the extraneous strangeness here. But thank you for joining me. I hope you have a great rest of your week and happy knitting. I'll see you next time.
Close the curtain, brew some herbal tea. Reach out for me. Oh, and take my hand and lead, even when I disagree. Rest sweetly. Close the curtain.